Welcome to everyone to the webinar that is being hosted by ThetaRay in collaboration with MFS Africa. My name is Dagan Osovlansky. I'm the Chief Product Officer for ThetaRay in the last 2.5 years, 20 years in the business. And I would like to welcome you to this webinar that will focus on AML and best practices in AML, and how we use or the use of AI in combination with best practices in AML can be transformative, can change the business, can change the fighting financial crime. And we are very privileged to have our speakers here with me today. I will start with Mr. Peter Raynolds, our former ThetaRay CRO, now ThetaRay CEO. Peter has long experience in, you can clap. Congratulations, Peter.
Thank you.
Long experience in AI and financial technology, and we will speak about it later on. We also very privileged to have with us Funmi Dele-Giwa from MFS Africa, who is the General Counsel and Head of Governance, Risk and Compliance. Thank you, Funmi, for coming. Obviously, we'll share from your amazing experience in the area of AML, compliance, and also the amazing experience in payments. Just a bit about MFS Africa. For the people who might not know, MFS Africa is really a huge player, leader in the market of payments all across Africa. If anybody wants to understand what is financial inclusion, probably he needs to look at MFS Africa. And again, as a leader in that area, I'm sure that Funmi will enrich our discussion immensely. Before we will drill down and we'll start our discussion, everybody can ask questions, just send them over the chat, and some of them we'll try to answer during the discussion, and we will open the floor for a question at the end of our discussion. So if we are ready to start, let's start. Peter, as an expert in the payments, first of all, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
As an expert in the payments industry, and you helped bank and fintech in fighting illicit activities, anti-money laundering, terror financing, human trafficking for many years. How do you see the combination between AML and artificial intelligence, how it helps the banks and the payments fintechs to fight financial crime?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for having me, and thank you to Funmi. I think last time we spoke, it was less than 5 days ago. You were delayed on the way to, I think, Rwanda, and I was delayed on the way to Tel Aviv, and now you're in Johannesburg, and I'm back in London. So I'm very happy that you can give us an hour of your time. I know you're exceptionally busy, and thank you to the team who host these webinars, and of course to all our customers joining today. It's a real pleasure to get the opportunity to talk to you. I think the question's a great question, Dagan, and I'd like to start with what's causing the problem. Let's take a step back. We've had digitization, and we all know that digitization was accelerated by, we don't really talk about it anymore, now COVID and lockdowns. And that led to real-time payments, both as a desire. So me sending, Funmi $50 that I owe her because we had a dinner is something that people expect to do. And then markets. I was on calls with a customer this morning in Australia, and they're about to go into retail payment systems. So there's a huge amount of real-time payments. Cross-border payments are going up and up, and I'll leave some of that to our friends at MFS Africa who are leading in that space. Add to that, so the volumes have gone very big. Add to that, the amount of regulation has gone very big. So of course, we've always had AML regulations looking for illicit transactions like terrorist financing. We also now, unfortunately, have war that's happening, and governments are fighting war with sanctions. So it's a very scary time if you are a payment operator or a bank and you have payments coming through your system that you might not know where they're coming from or who they're to. That's very, very important. You've got a huge expansion of customer choice. If we were holding a webinar 20 years ago, which we wouldn't have been on Zoom, MFS wouldn't have been a thing, right? But suddenly there is a huge amount of customer choice. There's a huge amount of customer expectations. If I have the choice of sending Funmi that $50 and one of them is going to take me 3 days and cost me $7, and the other is going to be real time and cost me a little bit of money, I have choice. And then add in something I was thinking about this morning. Everyone's living through a cost of living crisis. So everyone's trying to reduce the amount they pay for things. So I also want my payment to be cost effective. You know, what is a payment? A bit of data that's going around the world. Like if I use some of the like traditional methods, I might be paying $10 for that. Well, I don't think that makes sense. So I think that's where we are. And so really as a company, a fintech or a bank that's sending payments, there's so much now to monitor. There's so much to now look for. I want to avoid fines, and we'll talk about that later on. I want to keep my license. The old way we used to do things was with KYC. So if I'm a bank and Funmi is going to make a payment through me and I know her or I can ID her and she's sending a payment to another bank that knows her, it was okay. And if you think about the evolution of banking, we had branch banking and that was easy to do. And then we're digitization. Now we start having cross-border digitization. Often I don't know where the money's going to because it might be going through a correspondent banking network, but KYC won't work because I don't know how to KYC the person, or some of us would probably guess that it wouldn't be that hard to open a bank account with a fake ID. And so how good is the KYC going to be? So we started this industry of transaction monitoring. So we monitor transactions. At first we used rules. So what we did is we said, hey, every payment over X, let's say $50. So that payment to Funmi that I'm making, it's over $50 or it's $50. So let's flag it and let's look at it. And that caused huge inefficiencies. Firstly, there's lots of payments of that size that go through the system. So suddenly what we started doing is flagging payments that didn't need to be flagged, or what we call in the industry false positives, which causes a huge amount of noise because I now have to look at all of those payments, and I'll link that to customer experience later in the day. And plus criminals know the rules. So I can transfer $100 million in $49 batches in bank accounts that my bot's opened. So those rules aren't going to stop the bad guys. The only payment that stopped is my one to Funmi, where I did actually owe her $50 for dinner. So what's the use in it? So coming back to your point, when you know the problem and the way we're trying to fight it, and AI, is that AI is the only way that you can look at the transactions, understand what's normal, so learn what's normal. So that $50 payment from me to Funmi would be learned as a normal transaction, and start highlighting what's not normal. So that to me is where AI will change the game, is it will mean that we will only look at the transactions that are probably bad rather than the transactions that have a certain characteristic that we think should trigger us looking at something.
Thank you, Peter. Funmi, maybe from your angle as the head of governance, risk and compliance, how do you see AI assisting to, in the world of compliance and risk management? Can you share your experience?
Oh, happy to, and thank you so much for inviting me, Peter and Dagan. It's a privilege to be here, and I'll try to share as much knowledge as I have. But it's an interesting, background that you've set, Peter, to the entire story. Looking at how we can address the issues that we are facing so simply makes it easier for people to understand the need for the systems that are in place now. And for us, the matter of regulatory compliance and risk management go hand in hand, because As you've identified, Peter, over the years, multiple regulations have come in place that people and organizations like ourselves who are managing payments or involved in the payments industry need to comply with, whether it's AML or CFT or it's sanctions. They're cropping up more and more. And we have seen that AI is useful in helping you to identify those rules. So where you operate as the rules, as the laws, as the regulations are enacted, then you are identified, or they are identified, and you are highlighted, and you begin to implement these things and track them. And that's one way that we've seen AI being used. We've also seen it being used in transaction monitoring, just like Peter has highlighted, in that where there are specific rules that are in place around AML and CFT, then transaction monitoring helps. And so it manages the risk. It manages the risk that we as an organization want to take, are willing to take. It helps us to identify the risks that are out there, because with AI comes the ability to see trends in large swaths of data, and that's the key thing here. It's easy for you to say that you will look at a few spreadsheets here and there, but if you're processing millions of transactions a day, then you can't rely on paper, you can't rely on just one individual. You need machine learning to help you. And that's where AI comes in, specifically more important for us, that we are using machine learning to be able to see trends that are not easily visible when looking at one spreadsheet or two spreadsheets or one transaction or two transactions, where you're able to link them. And we operate in a space that is not in just one jurisdiction or one country. We operate across several jurisdictions, which means that the ability to link transactions from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, or link regulation from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, is very important for us, so that we remain compliant across the entire African continent. And so AI is really helping us in building that capacity within the organization.
Yeah, I think it's extremely interesting, because I think you coming from MFS Africa, and I think it's also taking a segue to the next, maybe switching gear to the next real hard thing. It's like how you serve the underserved, how you increase financial inclusion. And we know, and Peter, I think, touched about it, the cost of transaction, the standard in the banks, in the standard network, it's unbearable for some population. And I think it's something that it's also like so important. And I think, Peter, maybe here we are in the context of Africa. And I think this is probably, in my view, the heart of the subject of how AI with the combination of AML practices, how this has helped to serve the underserved, how it's impact the financial inclusion.
Yeah, I think, and I think here it's lovely to have answered that question in the context of having MFS Africa with us, because that is such a core, fundamental vision that they have, and so do we. And we work with, lots of people around the world who are doing that. And we recently did a testimony with Now Money about how, in Dubai, migrant workers send money back to their, families, which is why they're doing that. So it's something that we take very, very importantly here at ThetaRay, and it's something that's very important to a lot of the companies in Africa, and especially MFS. And I think it goes back to what I said earlier. If we'd been talking 20 years ago about payments, firstly, there wouldn't have been an answer, because I think fintech is enabling that answer. So if you look at Africa, especially, a lot of the unbanked population don't have access to mainstream banking, and not having access to mainstream banking is a problem, because things we take for example, things we take for granted, like being able to buy food with a card that's linked to a bank account, doesn't exist. So if you don't have access to mainstream banking, then you've got a problem. one of the beauties of Africa right now is the absolute explosion of fintechs and payment companies that are doing that, and big proper well-governed gateways and payment gateways like MFS Africa are making that like something that can become a reality. And also I think it's even a bigger problem because a lot of those, if you think about a lot of the unbanked places in Africa, sometimes there's civil war. I mean, we all know what's going on in different countries at the moment, and there's, you know, different sanction systems, there's different, you know, different problems politically, and what you often end with is a unbanked population of good people who need funds and they need money, and they get blocked from it. So I think if you can have great tech, and I think AI is just such a fundamental part of that, that can help you, if I like, allow the flow of funds for the good people and block the bad, then that will be very, very important. And I think I've been very impressed. We talked about MFS Africa in the context of Africa, but I've been very watching them for many years. And if you look at like acquisitions in America and what have you, and I think if you take a platform like MFS Africa investing in you know, compliance, and clearly they do, with Funmi running such an important part of that business and providing the ability to send payments around the world in a way that regulators are going to be okay with, and then you allow that flow of funds, say from the US into Africa and Africa into Europe. And I think that's, you know, very, very important. And that's the only way you'll solve the problem, is the ability to allow those kind of non-bank alternatives to send funds in a way that the regulator is absolutely happy with. Funmi, I'm probably experienced of us, and to answer this, the less educated at least, because it's part of what you do day to day. I'd love to know your view.
No, I thought, you know, you did a good job. So I was just going to say, I just add a few things there. At MFS Africa, we are passionate about making payments available for everybody. And one thing that you might have already heard our founders say lots and lots of times is that we want to make making payments as easy as making a phone call. You take it for granted now that you pick up your phone and you put in a number and it goes. And that's how we want it to be. And we are in a jurisdiction that, apologies, we're in a jurisdiction where we have less, should I say, adoption of bank accounts. And so what we have as a replacement that has caused Africa to sort of leapfrog the rest of the world is mobile money. And we have, as an organization, championed the connection of mobile money networks as much as we can to the hub to enable cross-border transactions, or to our hub, which is what we call our MFS Africa technology, to enable cross-border transactions and enable payments as simply and as easily as possible. So for us, financial inclusion is very important, and we understand the power that making a payment gives to a family, a business, an individual, a student, and in any way that we can facilitate that, you know, we try to make that possible. But we also and we have to abide by what is required by regulation and by regulators. And so we take regulatory compliance very seriously, and we ensure that the transactions that flow through our network are properly, whether it's from KYC and AML perspective, properly covered, from a transaction monitoring perspective, properly monitored. And if there are things that need to be flagged, they're flagged, so that we keep the bad actors out and we facilitate an open channel for those who really need to have payments and make payments.
Yeah, I think it's so important. I couldn't agree more that the world's full of problems, but one of the things that makes a problem so much worse is the inability for funds to move, as you say, from good actors, people to running businesses, people, you know, trying to do these things. That's it's such an important point, that it's much bigger than just, you know, sometimes we look at this, that someone wants to pay someone because, you know, XYZ reason, but sometimes it's a real fundamentally important reason. It's a very good point.
Correct. It's sometimes just a hotel, so a hospital bill, or a school fee bill, or just food. And if we can help as much as we can, we try to do so.
I have to say that from one end, I agree. It's like a major issue in Africa, but I think on the other hand, it's beautiful. It's like, you know, when you have like arteries and veins in the heart, that if something doesn't work and the network doesn't work natively, so it's actually have bypasses. So I think that's amazing because in a way, you and other companies in Africa created amazing bypass in order to overcome the problem, which I think it's like almost like evolution of coming out of the issue. And I think this is very important. And maybe looking at it from maybe the another side, Peter, we talk a lot about AI and compliance and AML, but what do you think it's the impact on the business, on the growing the business, making more business?
Yeah, I mean, I'll pick on MFS because they're here, but you just Google a bit about MFS, you'll see that they've been an absolute, you know, beacon in the Africa fintech world. They're a hugely growing company. They're employing lots of people. They're, you know, it's been a great success case, and I'm sure they want to grow and they want to grow and they want to grow. This is the world we live in. So I think there's to grow, which I don't know many banks or fintechs that ever start the year by saying, listen, we're just going to decrease by 30%, you know, like usually it's about increasing. So how do you increase your business? Well, you have to be able to operate in many countries. And I'm always full of respect for people like MFS Africa, who where they locate is a place which has so many countries. Like it's just, we have to be able to know what we're doing in Rwanda, and we also know what we're doing in South Africa, and we've just done an acquisition in the US. So it's multiple jurisdictions. Now you can only grow your business if you're able to de-risk your business. And we kind of talked when Funmi was talking about spreadsheets, she put it in one way, but what I call the unknown unknowns. So how do you find the illicit transactions or the things going on that can't be found by a rule? You know, a rule is great. It's as great as the person who wrote it. So if the rule is, you know, if a payment comes through from, you know, Mr. Putin at Red Square, of course, that's an easy rule to find, but we don't live in a world where that's how payments get put through systems. We get a world where payments get through in all different, you know, shapes and sizes. And so finding the unknown unknowns so that you can sleep at night, and especially as a head of compliance, and, you know, complying with regulators. Look, everyone knows if you get it wrong is a big problem. Look at Danske Bank, you know, $2 billion fine for the US authorities for not having deficient AML systems. So not doing enough to try and find it. Now, it's really important that when you grow and you grow globally, that you understand not only what the regulators need, but you also do what the regulators need and show you can. And then I also think customer experience. I talked earlier about different choice. I think there's a lot of choice in the market. And I just want to be boring for a minute and talk about like efficiencies and customer happiness, because when you had rules, we talked about rules a minute ago, and I talked about having lots of false positives, so lots of alerts. So this payment might be bad. And then what you end up is with a very low detection worthy result. So if I'm running a payment company and I have thousands of false positives, I'm going to have a very low detection worthy rate, because of all those false positives that I now have to look at, only a few of them I needed to look at. Now, that's going to be a really bad customer experience, because rather than my payment for $50 going through to Funmi, it's being investigated by someone who's looking at hundreds of alerts. So not only does it not go quick enough, the reason it's not going quick enough is because there's human intervention looking at, is it a problem? Go back to what I said about AI, I get a low false positive rate. So all of the normal transactions can flow. I only look at the ones that are probably bad. And then what I have is a very high detection worthy rate. So of the transactions that were flagged, they should have been flagged. I'm glad I looked at them. So that is a efficiency argument, but actually it comes across as a customer experience issue, because all of those transactions that are allowed to flow, firstly, get there quicker, and can be cheaper because they didn't need any human intervention. They flowed through. So I think it's all linked. Like, it's impossible to grow your business if you're not complying. You don't have ability to de-risk, because if I'm, the CEO of a payment company and I'm taking payments from a country that I have no idea how I'm going to monitor it, then I've got more risk. And when I have more risk, I typically have to charge more. So that's how that kind of feeds into the customer. And then, of course, the customer, ultimately, it's all about customer experience and customers wanting to use the platform.
And just to add, I think there's one key thing that businesses need to understand is making compliance part of strategy. It's not an afterthought. It's not something that you do because you're just trying to keep the regulator happy, or you just don't want to get in trouble. But if you build it into your business, then it makes it simpler and easier for you to identify what you need to do to make it easy for you to comply and be a successful business and get the results that you want and grow at, 10x, 5x, because you've embedded compliance as part of strategy. And that's something that we've seen as an organization, because as we grew and as we developed the technology, we also developed proprietary systems that helped us to make sure that we are compliant and the transactions that flow across our systems are compliant. And when we grew and as we grew as large as we did, it was easy for us to identify that we needed to partner with a ThetaRay to grow and to be able to see more transactions, see more trends, because it's important to us and it's an important part of strategy.
Do you know what? That is such a true point for me, and we should have even mentioned it as one of the questions, because I completely agree. Compliance has gone from a back office kind of like, like the don't bother compliance. Like, they'll tell us what not to do.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a business enablement department where you're finding that one of the, I think, evolutions on the market with things like AI is compliance becoming a strategic partner and actually saying, yeah, absolutely, you can do payments all over these parts. This is how you do it. And I think the organizations who use compliance as a business enablement department are the ones that are going to, really, really grow, because it's, if imagine, I'm sure your board think about it all the time, like, we're doing payments across the whole of Africa. Wow, are we at risk? And when they've got compliance as part of that growth journey, then it must give people so much confidence that decisions have been made in conjunction with compliance and business, which I think has been a major shift. Again, I think we've seen that across the ThetaRay client base, haven't we?
Yeah, we see it across, and it's so different than previous experience. Both of us had the pleasure to work together for a long time, doing a lot of projects with very large banks. And I remember, now we have to go to compliance, like with fear that they probably will tell us that we can't do this, we can't do that. And I think that's a major shift that we see with our customer, because suddenly you don't have to say no. You will say, yes, but I will be able to monitor specifically and to find the specific people that are bad. And I will not have like a blanket decision to say, no, it's too risky. Because we know today people are like, in the entire gambling segment is risky. You can do payments. The entire specific countries can do payments. And I think that's what we hear more and more. And I think it's a huge, huge benefit. And maybe just, we spend a lot of AI. Maybe, the regulators and AI, how do you see this kind of game? I'm sure that if we had this discussion 3 years back, the answer would be very, very different. But how do you see the work with the AI and how the regulators look at the AI?
I think that there's greater acceptance of the fact that this is a benefit, and even I think the FATF had issued a document back in 2021 that encouraged the use of AI, and looking at it from being able to detect anomalies and being able to refine your results, a bit like what Peter has spoken about. that you refine your alerts in such a way that you are not wasting time on false positives, or you're reducing false positives in the system, and you are better able to identify the key issues that you should be monitoring. And I think that has been an approach that's been welcomed across the regulatory sphere, that regulators want to see that you are taking your responsibilities for sanction screening and transaction monitoring very seriously, and see that you're investing in it. And there's not just investing in manpower and people, but in systems as well. And they welcome it. And we have been, and I think I've mentioned this before, but we've had a proprietary system, and that was one of the key things that was a selling point with not just our partners, but with regulators, to get them comfortable with who we are and what we do. That even though the regulated entities, the MNOs, the mobile network operators, or the banks have their own way of screening and monitoring transactions, that we as a middle layer, we do the same thing, means that the transactions that flow through our hub get touched on by transaction monitoring and screening at least 3 times. So they know that this is a place that, or this is a company that takes this very seriously. And it's something that has flown through the entire industry, that they are looking for companies, they're looking for fintechs, they're looking for banks, they're looking for mobile network operators, whoever is participating in the financial ecosystem, they want them to take this seriously. And if AI is what will help, then they welcome it. And I do know that ThetaRay is working with some of these regulators across Africa as well. So if you guys are seeing the uptick, then surely it is gaining ground.
Yeah, and I think, sorry, Dagan, I was just going to add to that and say that I think firstly, by the way, forget just ThetaRay for a minute. We see regulators around, if you look at regulators around Europe, we're seeing more and more using AI, and you're right, we work with some of them and we're seeing it as a more common thread. But I just want to take it back to the kind of silliness. And for me, I don't know if you've picked up on it, but I pick up on the AI is going to ruin the world and AI is going to kill everyone. And the kind of like this kind of like, it seems that we have to go through these cycles where something becomes popular and then everyone who doesn't really understand it has an opinion, and then we have to ride that wave. And it's so funny to me because you know, I'll tell you a story. We were, there was a very proud day a while ago, and I won't mention names, but a particular bank customer of ours used our technology to uncover a child smuggling ring. And so you can imagine people in ThetaRay, this was an important, like, we have developers who this is far more important to why we live, that the technology can do this. And so I sit in a chair where I see AI finding things like that, or finding, you know, terrorist financing, or finding money laundering, or stealing, or all these kind of horrible things that no one wants. And then, you know, I finish my week, I read the Sunday papers, and I see AI is going to ruin the world. And I think it, but I do think it is funny because the practical application of AI, you can use AI to do many things. You absolutely could use AI to do some bad things, but taking it something that is powerful as AI and having a practical application where you're going to find, you know, terrorist financing, like, it's such a positive for the world, and yet we have to just kind of go for these papers and papers. I don't know, Funmi, if you find that, like, globally, I know you travel around the world. Do you find it's globally this kind of AI is going to take over and kind of thing?
Yeah, but then you come with explaining that, yeah, AI is literally in everything that you do nowadays. So if AI is taking over the world, you know, it's helping you. It's helping you make your life easier. Now, there will be bad actors, but it doesn't mean that AI is, as an entire scheme, is completely bad. And so, yeah, I agree. I see quite a bit of that. And you're right. There is always the introduction of something new, and it's all bad, and people don't want it. And then they begin to realize that, you know, this is actually what is powering, you know, their heating or their ability to turn on their lights from, you know, when they're on their way home.
Exactly.
It's those simple things that people then begin to realize that AI is actually helping them.
I agree.
Yeah, maybe, and the fact that AI is with us for years already, and we are pretty okay. Okay, we are okay. We nothing really bad happened that relates to AI. But seriously, I feel that we can continue this discussion for like a few good hours because we all like the subject and like to speak. But I think, first of all, thank you for both of you, Funmi, Peter. I think it was extremely insightful. We spoke about AML and AI and how this technology, how we can make a serious impact on the market, on people. How this is like in the context of what you say. No, AI is not bad. AI can be bad if it's being used in a bad way. But we are trying to actually show how AI can be used in amazing way to help people. So seriously, I can't thank you enough. Thank you for this conversation, and we will open the floor for question. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, as I'm typing answers while also looking for more questions, I would like to thank everybody. I hope it was interesting, and I hope you enjoyed at least as much as I did. And if there is any more question or any more information, you can always contact us, go to our website, and thank you for joining the webinar. I will answer a few more questions while I'm switching off. Thank you. Okay, so I got few questions, so I'll try to answer it here with you guys. So there is a question about the adoption of AI and the regulatory framework around it. So in the context of AML, transaction monitoring, we actually see quite a lot of tailwind and almost instructions from the regulators to start to use advanced technologies as AI. The FATF, the ACPR, other bodies in Europe and in other areas, the FSA in the UK are really starting to push the financial institution to use such technology. I think it's the recognition that rule bases can't meet the actual problem or mitigate the problem. So I think that's with regards to the question about the adoption of AI. Also, how does AI assist to prevent authorized push payments fraud? So I can answer it at least from the way we use the solution and the tool, just to make sure ThetaRay is not a fraud prevention tool. I had another question around it. But the monitoring the transaction, when we are doing it, we will obviously look for patterns that are abnormal behavior. And the abnormal behavior, regardless whether it's a fraud, human trafficking, what is the underlying reason for the abnormal behavior, will be catched and will be flagged. So although we are focusing on AML and not pure fraud, we do see alerts that actually representing fraudulent activities. So that's from about the question of the fraud. And I think the last question that I see, no, there are many more questions. How ThetaRay can help my company if I'm in the payment segment? Well, you came to the right place, because we are focusing on helping payments company and obviously banks and the traditional financial institution as well, to have better control, better compliance practices, and then enable them actually to grow their business. Because as we discussed during the discussion, it's like when we allow you to have better understanding and tighter control that only flag the bad people, you can allow the good people to do transaction seamlessly, with no frictions, and with a much better service. Okay, any lead indicators on detecting money laundering? Any example of usage of AI or historical behavior? From examples, without naming names, and I think Peter, if I'm not mistaken, mentioned it, we do have historical incident that we know for sure that we tracked terror financing, child trafficking, and AML activities. And if the question is more whether we know to take to learn from the historical behavior, so we always take the historical behavior as our tool to learn the normal behavior of the customers of the transaction, and the system is very sophisticated to understand what is the normal behavior without us even needed to teach what is the normal behavior, and learns what good looks like, and that's how the system learns from the historical behavior in the data to flag the abnormality. And with the context that we add of the risk, we know to flag the problematic transaction and the problematic investigated entities that needs to be looked at and needs to be take a decision whether it is suspicious or not. So again, thank you everyone. I don't see any other questions. So I hope you enjoyed, and see you in our next webinar or one of our events that many coming soon. Bye.